Assalamu alaikum. Assalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. In a recent Qur'an jalasa, a question was raised about Jinn, and I was told that a Qur'an commentator had said that Jinn are not really different beings, different creations. Rather, they were humans who were foreign or stranger coming from an unknown land, hence referred to as jinn or hidden. I am paraphrasing here, but the claim was that because Arabs at that time did not travel distances and did not know anything about the people in faraway land, everything about faraway land was hidden to them. Hence, since they could not see them, they called them hidden or jinn. And the claim was that the Qur'an is referring to people whom were hidden from Arabs, strangers or foreigners, if you will. This opposed to being called insan, which comes from the root word ins, to mean familiar with. In other words, this theory says Qur'an uses insan terminology for Arab tribes who were familiar with their own people, and jinn for those whom they were unfamiliar with or were strangers, far away, hidden from them, yet human-like them. So then the question was asked, could this theory be true? Were they just human beings from a faraway land hidden to Arabs? If not, what is the creation called jinn, and why are they even mentioned in the Qur'an if they have nothing to do with us? Today, we will try to discuss this topic and will answer these questions through the Quranic verses, which are the best references we have. Verses which talk about this creation as much as God wanted us to know about. And what better way than explaining it through the chapter named after them, which is Al-Jinn. However, the story of Jinn is not limited to this chapter and it's mentioned in other chapters, some of which we will also touch on in order to get the full picture and answer the above questions, inshallah. First, let's get some terminologies defined as the Qur'an uses them. And I will give you the address of the verses using these meanings without going through each one of them in the interest of time. The word jinn means hidden, and its plural is John, mentioned in Surah Al-Rahman, chapter 55, verse 15. John also means snake, as mentioned in Surah Al-Naml, chapter 27, verse 10. Jannah means garden or heaven, and also means covering, which is mentioned in Surah Al-An'am, chapter 6, verse 76. Jannah means mad or possessed, as reflected in Surah Al-A'raf, chapter 7, verse 184. Then we have Jannah, which means screen or shield, in Surah Al-Mujadala, 58:16, chapter 58, verse 16. And Ajinna means hidden, mentioned in Surah Al-Najm, chapter 53, verse 32. We already defined insan and ins as well. Now, first let's prove why the above theory is false. Given above definitions for each word taken from the root word jinn, we will bring evidence from the Qur'an rejecting the notion that jinn was a human from lands far away who were unknown and hidden to Arabs in that time due to their lack of access to the entire world. Hence, they refer to these strangers from faraway land or unseen land as jinn because they were hidden from them. For simplicity, we will refer to them as hidden men. We ask then, if that is true, why do we have verses like the following? Number one, and this is just a sample we're giving here. Number one, behold, we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam. They all prostrated except Iblis. He was one of the Jinn. Chapter 18, verse 50, Surah Kaf. We ask, was Iblis then a hidden man? If Iblis was a man, then why would he be asked to prostrate before his own kind or another man? Number two, we have another verse that says, we created man of clay like the potter's clay, and created jinn from smokeless fire. Surah Al-Rahman, chapter 55, verses 14 and 15. So these verses clearly say human, insan, and jinn, mentioned in plural from John, are created from different material. Then how could jinn mean a man from faraway land or a hidden man? Number three, Qur'an tells us they have different capabilities. As it says, indeed, he, means shaitan, and his tribes see you from where you cannot see them. Surah Al-A'raf, chapter 7, verse 27, referring to shaitan, which we already mentioned is from the jinn creation. Number four, other activities mentioned about the jinn in chapter 72, Al-Jinn, which we are about to talk about. As it says, like you humans, they thought that Allah would never raise the dead. The jinn continued saying, we made our way toward heaven, but we found it filled with the stern guards and a flame, and we used to sit on high places to listen. But he who listened found a flame waiting for him. Chapter 72, verses 7 and 9. And we'll talk more about this. Does this sound like what a human would do? Number five, we read in Surah Al-Hijr, chapter 15, verses 26 and 7. Verily, we created man of potter's clay, and before him we created the jinn race from smokeless fire. How could then jinn be the same as human? When God says in this verse that they were created before us, before our time, as it says, verily we created man of potter's clay, and before him we created the jinn race from smokeless fire. I think the point is made, and taking the word jinn to mean faraway human or hidden away humans would make above verses completely meaningless. Not to mention the fact that we have many verses that call on or address jinn and ins separately in the same verse, indicating they are two different creations. Are we to assume all verses given about jinn and the whole chapter named after jinn in the Qur'an are now useless because now humans do not have the distances between them, and the distances this theory claims they used to have? Hence, no strangers or hidden humans anymore. Not to mention we have verses that talk about Arabs taking jinn or as a divine being like angels due to their assumed special powers and so close to God that they assumed kinship between God and the jinn, as indicated in chapter 37, verse 158. So now, we will give an introduction to this surah chapter, Al-Jinn, and then start with the explanation of verses about the jinn. And as we go through these verses, the fallacy of the above theory becomes even clearer. Plus, we will be answering the questions posed earlier with the explanation of related verses. If we look back in human history, generally speaking, people in various parts of the world have often believed in hidden creations who were powerful or had special powers that could help them or they could depend on. As such, being possessed was considered in Christianity, and there were priests who specialized in exorcism. In Arabia, they had divided various sections of the desert and considered each section belonging to a particular jinn. And when they entered these regions, they would seek the protection of this specific jinn with a name whom this section belonged to. They also believed that God married the jinn, and they then produced angels, as mentioned in chapter 37. In general, they thought jinn possessed powers close to God's. As the Qur'an says, yet they, meaning idolaters, regard the jinn as the partners of Allah, although He created them, and without knowledge ascribe to Him sons and daughters, means to God. Exaltation to Him, He is above what they describe. Chapter 6, verse 100. Here is the answer to why God mentions jinn and its creation in the Qur'an. Considering above facts which we just went through regarding the pagan Arabs, Allah apparently deems necessary to expose the reality about jinn's creation and what they are, in order to rid humans from all these deviated beliefs, shirk, and superstitions that had led them astray. As such, the Qur'an acknowledges that in addition to all the creations that can be seen, yes, there are hidden forms of creations, like the jinn and the angels, that exist in different dimensions, who have their own attributes, characters, and abilities, of which Allah gives us a glimpse, like the following. Number 1, jinn were created long before humans, and they are made out of what Qur'an calls smokeless fire, as opposed to human created from pottery like clay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد خلقنا الإنسان من سلسال من حمأ مسنون والجان خلقناه من قبل من نار السموم. Verily, we created man of potter's clay, and before him we created the jinn race, from smokeless fire. Chapter 15, verses 26 and 27. Number 2, jinn race have free will, much like humans. And they can be guided and go the straight path, or they can go astray and disobey Allah, as Iblis did when he refused to acknowledge Adam and bow in modesty before him. As the Qur'an states, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ. And remember when we said unto the angels, bow down before Adam, and they all bowed down, except Iblis. He was of the Jinn. Hence, he rebelled against his Lord's command. Chapter 18, verse 50. Number 3, just like humans, prophets were sent to Jinn race as well, to show them the path to guidance and success, as the Qur'an asks both creations, both of them. يا معشر الجن والإنس ألم يأتكم رسل منكم يقصون عليكم آياتي وينذرونكم لقاء يومكم هذا. O assembly of jinn and humankind, did there not come to you messengers of your own who narrated to you my verses and warned you of encountering this day? Chapter 6, verse 130. Also notice Qur'an mentions both human and the jinn because they are considered two separate creations. Number 4. However, just like humans, many of the jinn race were rebellious and disobedient, and they were from the Iblis tribe, whose final destination will be hell, as the Qur'an informs us. وَلَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ. We have destined many of humankind and jinn for hell. Chapter 7, verse 179. Number 5. The jinn race do not have the knowledge of unseen, the ghaib, as the Qur'an informs us. فَلَمَّا خَرَّ تَبَيَّنَتِ الْجِنُّ أَنْ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ الْغَيْبَ مَا لَبِثُوا فِي الْعَذَابِ الْمُهِينِ. And when he fell down, the jinn realized that had they known the ghaib unseen, they would not have continued in their humiliating punishment. Chapter 34, verse 14. Number 6. The jinn have no influence or effect on humans and their lives, except that their shayateen can whisper to them. The bad ones can whisper to them. As such, they will make bad deeds look good to them. However, they have no influence on true servants of God, as the Qur'an recalls Shaitan's conversation with Allah. قال ربي بما أغويتني لأزينن لهم في الأرض ولأغوينهم أجمعين إلا عبادك منهم المخلصين. Shaitan said, Lord, because you have caused me to go astray, I shall make earthly things attractive to them, means to people, and mislead all of them, except those who are sincere and devoted servants. Except those who are your sincere and devoted servants. Chapter 15, verses 39 and 40. Given the above characteristics and attributes from the Qur'an, we continue with chapter 72, or Surah Jinn, which is a Meccan chapter and is divided into two parts. The first part is about the situation of group of jinn who were, of course, hidden and happened to be present or passing by when the verses of the Qur'an was being recited by the Prophet ﷺ, and were amazed at its words of guidance and were attracted to its message of oneness of God and the last day. They announced that during his prophethood, they saw some changes in the heaven as opposed to past that prevented them from penetrating to some regions within heavens. This first part of the chapter also emphasizes that the jinn race are divided into two groups, the believers and the devils, or the unbelievers, whose Shaitan's tribe is from. In general, three fundamental points are noted from this first part of the chapter. The first one is that the jinn race cannot hear or receive any revelation as it is being sent down through angel and revealed to the prophet. They can only hear it or become aware of it after they are revealed to the prophet and recited by him. Another point is that the chapter shows the Prophet ﷺ was not after them trying to preach to them. They just happened to hear him as he was reciting the Qur'an. Then they acknowledged few things amongst themselves which are revealed by Allah to the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise, he would have never known about it. As Allah says, إذ صرفنا إليك نفرا من الجن يستمعون القرآن فَلَمَّا حَذَرُوهُ قَالُوا أَنْصِتُوا. When we turn toward you, O Prophet Muhammad, a company of jinn who, when they came and listened to the Qur'an, they said to each other, listen in silence. Chapter 46, verse 29. The third point we want to make, we take away from these verses is that the Quranic verses relating to the principle of belief were amazing for this company of jinn. And they were attracted to them. Of course, not the verses that are specifically about the rules and commandments on the life on earth, which are more related to humans. We're talking about the verses that are about principle or usul ad-din, principles of faith. So with that, we go to the second part of the chapter, which talks about Prophet's invitation to pure Tawheed and the Qiyamah, resurrection day. It also remarks that the divine revelation is sent down from Allah to the Prophet without any interference or intervention or eavesdropping from anything or anyone, especially the jinn. And that Allah is supervising and monitoring the whole process. This to emphasize the fact that when Prophet ﷺ was revealed the Quranic verses and he recited them, they were true word of God without any interference, none from the jinn nor the angels. So, given above facts and points, an explanation of the two parts of the surah, we now continue with explanation of each verse in this chapter. قُلْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ أَنَّهُ اسْتَمَعَ نَفَرٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ فَقَالُوا إِنَّا سَمِعْنَا قُرْآنًا عَجَبًا. Muhammad, say, it's been revealed to me that a company of jinn listened to the Qur'an, then said, we have really heard a wonderful recital. Verse 1, of course, chapter 72. The Arabic word nafar, used in the opening verse and translated here as a group or company, signifies a group of 3 to 9 in numbers. Some reports suggest that they were 7. So 7 in this company. This opening suggests that the Prophet learned of the jinns listening to his recitation and what they did afterwards through revelation from God. It is also God who told him about that which he had no knowledge of. This might have been the first time, and there might have been one or more other occasions when the Prophet recited the Qur'an to the jinn, as reported by Jabir in a hadith related by Tirmidhi. The event mentioned in the present surah must be the same referred in referred to in Surah 46, the sand dunes, which says, "We sent to you a group of jinn as they listened to the Qur'an. When they heard it, they said to one another, 'Listen in silence.' When the recitation ended, they returned to their people to warn them. And then they said, 'Our people, we have been listening to revelation bestowed from on high after Moses, confirming what came before it. It guides to the truth and to straight path. Our people, respond to God's call and have faith in Him. He will forgive you your sins and deliver you from grievous suffering. He who does not respond to God's call cannot elude Him on earth, nor will they have any protectors against Him." Chapter 46, verses 29 through 32. These verses speak as does the present surah. If the great surprise felt by the company of Jinn, that was because of the amazing verses of the Qur'an. When they first listened to it, it had such a great effect on their minds, hearts, and feeling that they were filled with emotion, resulting in their travel in rush to tell their own kind. Their report expresses such overflowing emotions. "We have heard a wonderful recital." The first thing they realize about the Quranic discourse is that it is unfamiliar and that it makes the listener wonder. This is how the Qur'an is received by anyone who listens with an open and positive mind. He will find that the Qur'an contains intrinsic power, strong appeal, and beautiful music that touch hearts and, feelings. It is wondrous indeed, which tells us that the group of jinn listening to it had refined tastes. يهدي إلى الرشد فآمنا به ولن نشرك بربنا أحدا. That guides to the right path. We believe in it, and we will not associate anyone with our Lord. Verse 2. Giving guidance to what is right path. This is the second prominent feature of the Qur'an, which the jinn immediately felt within their hearts. That they use the word rushd, right path, to describe it, which is particularly significant. It is true that the Qur'an guides to what is right and sensible, but the term rushd also suggests maturity and wisdom that distinguishes right from wrong. Yet, this system enabled individuals and communities to attain high standards in personal morality and values, as well as in social relations and interactions with each other. The verse continues, "And we believe in it." This is the natural and second reaction they had. But it's a sound reaction that listening to the Qur'an and understanding its nature brings about. The surah puts this response to the unbelievers in Mecca who used to listen to the Qur'an but not believe in it. They even attributed it to the jinn, alleging that the prophet was fortune teller or a magician or a poet or a madman influenced by the jinn. Here we see the jinn wondering at the Qur'an, profoundly influenced by its discourse, unable to resist it. We see them able to discern the truth and submit to it. We have come to believe in it. And then the verse says, "We shall never associate partners with our Lord." Theirs then is a case of complete faith, untainted by delusions, superstitions, or any element of polytheism. So here it appears the first message, these hidden creation, the company of jinn received was oneness of God, Tawheed. And as such, the word of Qur'an had an effect on them. Of course, they were familiar with Torah, as we read in chapter 46, verse 30, that says, our nation, they said, means the jinn said, we have just been listening to a book sent down after Moses, confirming what came before it and guiding to the truth and to a straight path. Then they reject the idea of God having a family, which may have also been a belief among their own kind, their own ranks. وَأَنَّهُ تَعَالَى جَدُّ رَبَّنَا مَا اتَّخَذَ صَاحِبَةً وَلَا وَلَدًا. And exalted is the majesty of our Lord. He has taken neither a wife nor a son. Verse 3. The surah uses the Arabic word Jadd, attributing to God. This word's connotation is exalted, position, authority, and greatness. All of these connotations are meant here. What is intended here is to impart a clear feeling of God's greatness and his being far above taking a wife or a child for himself. The Arabs used to allege that the angels were God's daughters through a marriage to the jinn. Here, the jinn deny such a superstition in a most expressive way. They glorify God and deny that such a notion could ever have happened. The jinn would have proudly proclaimed such a connection had there been any possibility of it ever having taken place. Their denial delivers a massive blow at the unbelievers' baseless claims, and indeed at very similar claims alleging that God has taken a son to himself in any way, shape, or form. وَأَنَّهُ كَانَ يَقُولُ سَفِيهُنَا عَلَى اللَّهِ شَطَطًا وَأَنَّا ظَنَنَّا أَن لَّن تَقُولَ الْإِنسُ وَالْجِنُّ عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا. There were some foolish ones amongst us. This is the jinn talking. There were some foolish ones amongst us who used to utter extravagant lies against Allah. Yet we never thought that either human or jinn would ever tell a lie against Allah. The same chapter, verses 4 and 5. This is a critical examination of what the jinn used to hear some of the foolish among them, probably Iblis and his followers, say. Those are the ones who did not believe in God's oneness and who alleged that he had a wife or a son and partners. Now that they have heard the Qur'an, they realize this is all absolutely false. Those who promote such ideas are therefore foolish, lacking sound mind, sufaha. They explain they could not imagine that any creature, human or jinn, would ever prostrate and before anything else and perpetrate such a lie about God. It shows that their hearts and minds were free of deviation. They had only fallen into error as a result of the trust they assumed in other jinn. When they heard the truth, they immediately realized it and made their declaration, as we saw in verses 1 through 3. Verse 5 says, we never thought the elites and the leaders among both jinn and mankind could tell lies about Allah. The message to the Muslims who have understood the truth is to separate themselves from those among them who follow the falsehood and do not follow the religious or non-religious leaders who have gone astray. Next verse says, وَأَنَّهُ كَانَ رِجَالٌ مِنَ الْإِنسِ يَعُوذُونَ بِرِجَالٍ مِنَ الْجِنِّ فَزَادُوهُمْ رَهَقًا. True, in the past, some among mankind sought refuge with some of the jinn, but they caused them further trouble, further revolt. Verse 6. Here the jinn refer to what was widely accepted in pre-Islamic days in Arabian society and which remains accepted in many other communities today, unfortunately, claiming that the jinn exercised power on the earth and against human. Indeed, it was thought that they were able to bring about benefit and cause harm to people, and that they were in full control of certain areas of land, sea, and air, which is not true. So this company of jinn is asking, isn't it strange that we, the race of jinn, who ourselves are the creation of Allah and are in His hand, and without Him we cannot do anything, then we have people, mankind, humans, who left God and seeking refuge to us and trying to solve their problems through exorcism, or calling upon us, calling on spirits. And unfortunately, there are still people who claim to have connection with spirits and the jinn. That said, we know Shaitan is given access to people's minds and hearts. Only those who seek protection with God are saved from him. Whoever listens to him is listening to his own worst enemy, who will not bring him any benefit. On the contrary, Shaitan will increase his problems and his rebellion. وَأَنَّهُمْ ظَنُّوا كَمَا ظَنَنْتُمْ أَنْ لَنْ يَبْعَثَ اللَّهُ أَحَدًا. Like you, they thought that Allah would never raise the dead. Verse 7. Here is the reference to some among the jinn who were rebellious and did not believe in the resurrection day, Qiyamah, just like some humans who believe there is no day of accountability, Qiyamah. Continuing to report on what they learned about the last divine message and its echoes throughout the universe, the jinn disclaim any knowledge of the ghaib, or what lies beyond the reach of their perception, and human perception, of course. They disclaim having any role in it. وَأَنَّا لَمَسْنَا السَّمَاءَ فَوَجَدْنَاهَا مُلِئَتْ حَرَسًا شَدِيدًا وَشُهُبًا. We tried to reach heavens, but found it full of mighty guards and shooting meteors, shooting stars. Verse 8. This verse indicates that a group of jinn, considering the nature of their energy, attempted to reach the angel world in the heavens, so they can hear them and access their information. There, they found it well guarded, and stern guards and shooting meteors. وَأَنَّا كُنَّا نَقْعُدُ مِنْهَا مَقَاعِدَ لِلسَّمْعِ فَمَنْ يَسْتَمِعْ الْآنَ يَجِدَ لَهُ شِهَابًا رَصَدًا. There we would sit to eavesdrop, but now an eavesdropper finds a flame waiting for him. Verse 9. This suggests that the jinn used to try to reach up to heaven to eavesdrop on the angels and their discussion of, their assignment with respect to the affairs of God's creatures on earth. Then the jinn would impart such information to their human friends to enable them to delude people, in accordance with Shaitan's plot, of course. These human then, like fortune tellers and astrologers, would then use a small portion of the truth they received and mix it with much falsehood, circulating it among the people. Now, and that would be, what the fortune tellers do, the card readers do. What form this took place, or we don't know. When did it or would it take place? We don't know, because the Qur'an has not given us any information about it. Another aspect of this eavesdropping would have been to intercept and catch the revelations given to angel Jibril, to bring down to the prophet, and perhaps distort it and convey it to their human friends. Idolaters used to say that prophet has been possessed, perhaps by jinn. God wants to say prophets and the angel in charge are the first to hear the revelations and no one else. Hence, Allah has protected the integrity of His revelation to the prophets, and no interference from jinn or any other creation was allowed. This company of jinn say that such eavesdropping, to which they refer by reaching up to heaven, was not possible. When they tried it, they found the path blocked by mighty guards and shooting stars or meteors aimed at them, indeed killing them. They declare that they know nothing about what is determined for mankind. As they say, وَأَنَّا لَا نَدْرِي أَشَرٌ أُرِيدَ بِمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَمْ أَرَادَ بِهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ رَشَدًا. And so we do not know whether evil is intended for those on earth or their Lord intends to guide them to what is right. Verse 10. This verse talks about the company of jinn who were attracted to the Quranic guidance, saying they don't know what the reaction of mankind on earth will be when they hear these words of truth. How will they receive it? Will they mostly find it as guidance and follow it, or will they reject it and go astray and incur punishment? This verse also shows the jinn race cannot foresee future, especially at the time when this verse was revealed in early Meccan days. Many people had not accepted Islam yet, and it was not clear how people would react to the message of the Qur'an. They thus clearly declare that they have no access to such information because it is part of God's own knowledge. So, when the very source the fortune tellers claim to receive their special information from declares that it has no such knowledge, then nothing more can be said. All fortune telling and astrology are thus shown to be false. The world beyond belongs to God, who alone knows it in every which way, knows it all. No one can dare claim any special knowledge of it or predict in it. The Qur'an declares that the human mind must remain free of any such delusion. It rids mankind of all such superstitions. Who or what are those mighty guards? Where do they stand? The nature of the meteors or shooting stars? Neither the Qur'an nor the Hadith tells us anything of these questions. We do not have any other source to rely on. Had it been useful for us to learn any details of this, God would have divulged them. Since he has not chosen to do so, it is useless for us to guess. It does not add anything to our lives or to our useful knowledge, nor is there any use objecting to this information or arguing that meteors, for example, function according to a particular celestial order that remained in operation before and after the prophet's message, or by adding that astronomers are still trying to explain how the system works. Whatever theories astronomers and scientists come up with, and whether these are correct or not, are outside of our discussion here. The system does not preclude, however, that these shooting stars or meteors aim at devils as they try to eavesdrop, or that they move in accordance with God's will that gave them their operational system. Others view all this discussion as figurative, giving us an abstraction of how God preserves his message from being mixed up with falsehood. They say that such statements should not be taken at face value. The reason they take this line of thinking is that they approach the Qur'an with preconceived ideas that they acquired from other sources and try to give the Qur'an an interpretation that fits such preconceptions. Thus, they view the angels as a symbol of goodness and obedience to God. They view Shaitan and his group as a symbol of evil and disobedience, and the shooting stars as a symbol of the power of preservation and protection. This is because their notions, which they conceive before they look at the Qur'an, tell them that neither the angels, devils, nor jinn could have any physical existence or take any tangible action or leave any practical effect. Where do they get all this from? How do they arrive at such preconceptions to which they subject Quranic statements? The proper approach to understanding the Qur'an is to abandon all preconceptions, whether emotional, intellectual, or logical, and to formulate our concepts on the basis of the Qur'an's presentation of the truth about the universe. In other words, the Qur'an and Hadith must be taken only in light of the Qur'an. We must not try to negate or interpret anything stated in the Qur'an or to prove anything that the Qur'an negates or considers invalid. Of course, on anything else where the Qur'an neither proves nor negates, we may judge according to logic and experience. We naturally say this to people who believe in the Qur'an, yet try to interpret its statements according to their own preconceived ideas of how things in the universe must be. Those, on the other hand, who do not believe in the Qur'an, yet arbitrarily try to negate certain facts because science has not proven them, make laughable claims. Science has not yet fathomed these secrets of things that are available to scientists who use them in their research. This lack of knowledge does not negate their existence. Just because we don't know it, we don't see it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Moreover, large number of scientists began to believe in the unknown on the same lines as the religious people do, or at least these scientists do not deny what they don't know. Pursuing their scientific work, they have found themselves facing some unknowns when they had thought these to be totally known to man. Hence, they have become humble, and they are not prepared to make wild claims about that which they don't know anything about. They don't disregard the unknown as some of those who deny religion altogether. They just say, we don't know. Now, the surah moves on with the jinn having a conversation amongst themselves, as the Qur'an has given a sample of their conversation, as they describe their own situation and their own attitude toward the guidance, the divine guidance. We understand from this that they have a similar nature or parallel nature to mankind, with the dual propensity to either believe or go astray. This group who believed now speak of their fate and what fate awaits the followers of their, either course, whichever group there may be. So the verses 11 through 15 say, some among us are righteous and others less so. We follow widely divergent paths, different paths. We know that we can never escape God on earth, and we can never escape Him by flight. When we heard the guidance, we came to believe in it. Whoever believes in his Lord need not fear loss or injustice. Some of us submit to Him, and others are unfair, unjust. Those who submit to God are the ones who have endeavored to attain what is right. But those who are unjust, unfair, will be the fuel for hellfire. The statement that some of them are righteous and some less so, and that some submit to God and others refuse to do so, clearly indicates their dual capacity. They can be believers and unbelievers. Except that is for those who were determined to be unfair and unjust permanently from day one, which refers to Shaitan and his group. This is a very important statement as it corrects our general perception of these creatures. Many of us, including scholars, tend to think that the jinn represent evil, that their nature is decidedly bad, while man is the only creature capable of good or evil. It is time we corrected this wrong idea. This group of jinn say, some among us are righteous and others less so. They describe their general situation. We follow widely divergent paths, different paths. This means that each group takes a totally different course from the other, and the two paths do not meet. They go on to explain their own beliefs after they have accepted the divine faith. We know that we can never escape God on earth, and we can never escape Him by flight. Verse 12. They know God's power. They know they can never elude Him or escape from what He wills for them. They cannot elude Him on earth, nor can they elude Him by running away from earth. 2 points on this verse. Dhananna here does not refer to guessing or suspecting. It rather stands for expression of knowledge. So it means we know, we acknowledge. The second word, which is al-ard, does not refer to just to earth. It really refers to location. They relate the fact no matter where they are on earth or above earth, they cannot escape from God. They thus acknowledge their weakness before the Creator. They know that everything in the universe is subject to His absolute power. It is these very creatures, the Jinn, to whom some humans appeal for support and protection, and who they call upon for help. That includes the idolaters in Mecca. They are the ones whom the unbelievers claim to have a marriage relating with God. Yet, here they acknowledge their own weakness and God's power. They thus correct their own people's and the unbelievers' notion about them and the fact that the only power to which no other can stand is Allah's. Although they had already stated their belief, they repeat it here in the context of the jinn's differing attitudes to divine guidance. When we heard the guidance, we came to believe it. Verse 13. This is what anyone who hears divine guidance should do. What they heard was the Qur'an, but here they call it the guidance, confirming its nature and outcome. Whoever listens to Qur'an and follows its direction, he has gained guidance. They follow this by a statement confirming their absolute trust in God. Whoever believes in his Lord never needs to fear loss or overtaken by injustice. In verse 13, they have complete trust in God's justice and power. They know God is fair, and He will never fail to give believers their fair rewards. He never burdens them with what they cannot bear. He will protect believers against loss and burden of injustice or oppression. Who can inflict loss on a believer or overburden him when he is under God's care and enjoying His protection? Some believers may be deprived of some of life's riches, but this is not what is meant here by loss. Such losses are easily compensated for or regained. A believer may also suffer harm caused him by some earthly forces, but this is not the injustice the Quranic verse is referring to. God will always give the believer an increase of energy to be able to tolerate the pain and channel it in a positive way in order to strengthen him. The believer's ties with his Lord will ease the hardship, turning it to what is good for him both in this life and in the life to come. A believer, therefore, is reassured that he will suffer neither loss nor injustice. This reassurance gives him great confidence throughout times of ease. He's free of worry and fear. When things change and he suffers adversity, difficulty, he neither panics nor feels overwhelmed. He considers such hardship and misfortune to be a test God wants him to go through. He bears such adversity with patience. Indeed, he is rewarded for his patience. This group of jinn give a true description of this fact. The jinn now refers to their views about guidance and error and the requital for each in verses 14 and 15. Some of us submit to him and others are unfair. Those who submit to God are the ones who have endeavored to attain what is right. But those who are unfair, unjust, will be the fuel for fire. The jinn therefore contrast those who are unfair with those who submit themselves to God or are Muslims. This is a fine touch. It's very subtle. A Muslim who submits himself to God is always fair and righteous. You notice the contrast is not between one who submits and one who does not submit. It is rather those who submit, al-Muslimun, versus those who are unfair, qasitun, implying that if people set aside all biases and become fair-minded, surely they will acknowledge God and submit to Him. By the same token, it is unjust and unfair not to acknowledge God and not submit to Him. Yet, you can also interpret the verse to mean for a Muslim, all the roads to injustice are blocked. A Muslim will never seek injustice. Then the word taharru refers to those who seek or endeavor something better, something that is right, which is the guidance, as the Qur'an says, قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى وَأُمِرْنَا لِنُسْلِمَ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Say, surely the guidance of Allah, that is the true guidance, and we have been directed to submit ourselves to the Lord of Universe. Chapter 6, verse 71. Back to verse 14, that says those who submit to God are the ones who have endeavored to attain what is right. The way this sentence is phrased suggests that to be guided to Islam, a person needs to be very careful and meticulous in seeking proper guidance. It also implies a conscious choice of what is right, based on careful study and clear vision. This does not, however, come about by coincidence or by following the crowd, as it were. It means that these people arrived at what is right when they chose Islam and submitted themselves to God. Then in verse 15, but those who are unfair and unjust will be the fuel for the hellfire, meaning their fate is settled. They will become the fuel of hellfire, and as we said in verse 13, they will be in loss, both in this life and in hereafter, where they will be in torment. This confirms that the jinn are also punished in hell. It similarly implies that the good among them are destined for heaven, Jannah. No one can then say anything that is not based on the Qur'an, particularly about the nature of the jinn, hell and heaven. Whatever else is said in this regard is futile. With verse 15, the description of the jinn and their conversation is ended in this chapter. So, to summarize and discuss the existence of jinn in general, the surah corrects what the Arab unbelievers and other people used to say about the jinn, believing that they had exceptional powers and a large role to play in universe. Others who have denied the existence of these creatures outright, and when they mock anyone who so believes, do not tell us the basis of their denial. I haven't heard one. Some, as we mentioned, have a new theory that they were humans from far away, hidden, just so they can perhaps explain it or be in agreement with some sort of science and make it plausible. For both types, we ask, do they claim that they know every type of creature in the universe and cannot find the jinn among them? No scientist has ever made such a claim. The earth contains many species of creation, which are discovered from time to time. No one claims that there will ever be an end to the discovery of new species. We ask, do they believe that they know all the powers at play in the universe and cannot find the jinn among them? No one can make such a claim. Every day, new powers are discovered after having previously been unknown to man. Scientists try hard to know more of the powers and forces in the universe. They declare in an attitude of humility, which their scientific discoveries have taught them that they still stand at the edge of the unknown in the universe, and that they have hardly scratched the surface of it all. Again, we ask, have they seen all that can be seen by human? And did they not see jinn among them? Or the discoveries still continue? Since man has managed to produce nuclear fission, F-I-S-S-I-O-N, fission, scientists speak of the electron as a scientific truth. In other words, they all believe it exists. Electrons exist. No doubts, ifs, and buts about it. Yet, none of them has seen an electron. To this day, they do not have in their laboratories a machine that can isolate an electron. Why then people who deny jinn's existence are so insistent on negating the very existence of this species of creation when man's information about the universe, its forces and dwellers is so little? Is it because so many superstitions have been weaved around the jinn? If so, well, the proper course of action is to show how such superstitions are false, just as the Qur'an does, not by denying jinn's existence without presenting any proper evidence to support such a claim. Since this belongs to the realm that lies beyond the reach of our own perception, we should refer to the only source from which we have accurate and confirmed information. This source cannot be contradicted by preconceived ideas. And what this source tells us is final. This surah contributes significantly to the formulation of the Islamic concept of the truth of the Godhead and servitude to Him, as well as the truth of the universe and creatures living in it and their interrelations. In the jinn's account, we have confirmation of God's oneness, a negation of His having a spouse or a son. We have an affirmation of resurrection day and the life to come, and the fact that no creature can ever escape God anywhere in the universe, not just earth, but anywhere in the universe. All will receive their fair dues. The jinn's account asserts that worship belongs only to God, and that servitude to Him is the highest status people can attain. The surah confirms this in its address to the Prophet. It says in verse 21, "Say, it is not in my power to cause you harm or set you on the right course. The world beyond our perception belongs totally to God alone, and the jinn know nothing about it, as they acknowledged in verse 10, as we described, and they said, and so we do not know whether evil is intended for those on earth or whether their Lord intends to guide them to the right path. We learn from this surah that some interaction may take place between different types of creatures, even though they may have totally different natures and constitutions. An example of such interaction is what happens between man and the jinn, as mentioned in the surah and elsewhere in the Qur'an. We ask Allah to purify our hearts and help us purify our aqidah. We ask Allah to protect us from any superstitions and any form of shirk. We ask Allah to protect us from those who have fallen astray, serving shaitan and his crew. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Assalamu ala man ittaba'a al-huda.